John Deal's been called away for a vote on the House floor. I tell you what, that's how close we are to the seat of power with John Deal each and every week here, House Majority Leader. So we let him go. We gave him a special dispensation. So to fill out the board meeting is Tony Messenger from the editorial page and Jane Duker. Jane Duker, you want to talk about Normandy, some interesting things developing with Normandy and the school transfer.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm glad that the legislature is engaging, in a pretty fulsome debate right now.
Because they said that they'll give them the $5 million to finish out the school.
Right, and I think which is absolutely needed.
Which I believe John Deal said on this show was not going to happen.
Going to be difficult,
yeah,
right?
But it looks like they're going to get it.
It looks like they're going to happen, and so, but one issue I wanted to focus on regarding the school transfer debate, and hopefully this will be taken care of in any legislative action that's going on. So, there has been some obvious, issues in some North County districts. Wellston, I think, lapsed, and those in Riverview Gardens, and those kids, a lot of those kids ended up in the Normandy district.
The kids from Wellston did.
Yes. And I think that the people from Normandy went to DESE, the state board, and said, look, if we take all these kids, it's gonna be challenging for us. It's gonna change our scores. It's gonna be disruptive. And they basically told them, we're gonna give you some time, to absorb this, and we know that it's going to be difficult. So I can understand that the Normandy School District feels a little bit whipsawed because they agreed to take these kids, and they said, please give us, 3 years to sort of smooth this out, and it's only been 2 years. So that's a bit of an issue. And I understand that we got to go and we got to find medium-term solutions and long-term solutions to this, but I do not want to lose sight of these kids that have been whipsawed out of these districts. So if Normandy lapses, which I think is very likely.
What do you mean by lapse?
That means that they just basically, as a matter of law, they just don't exist anymore. They lapse because they run out of money.
And they're going to run out of money at the end of the year.
Absolutely. So they're going to get the $5 million is going to get the kids through the school year, and then they are very likely going to lapse. Then they are no longer a school district under the law, which means all of the kids that went through that transfer that we read about in the news, Francis Howell, and they are no longer entitled to that transfer anymore.
Because they don't
come from an unaccredited district anymore. They don't come from a district at all. Mm-hmm. So you conceivably, and there are kids that came from Riverview or Wellston, because that lapsed, they went to Normandy, and then because they became unaccredited, they transferred out. Mm-hmm. Now they will have to go. So whatever happens to that lapsed district.
How does Normandy not have a school district?
Because as a matter of law, they lapse. That's the way the law works.
So who takes over that school
The
district?
state will.
If a bill passes, but under the law now, they get absorbed into adjoining districts. And then these kids do not have the ability to transfer, and they just did all this for no reason at all.
Except for this. What Jane is talking about as it
relates
to the law
problem.
is accurate, I believe. I also believe
they're going to fix
it's
it,
not
I hope.
going to happen. For one of two things is going to happen. The bill that's making it through the legislature, and I'm not yet super positive that it's going to make it through because for a variety of reasons.
Issues.
But the Senate has given initial approval to a bill that does a couple of things. It keeps the transfer law in place. It does the most important thing that they should have done long ago, but they're starting to really realize is important. They fix the tuition problem for those kids that can transfer from an unaccredited district so that it doesn't bankrupt the next school district that goes through this. So there's some good things going on within the transfer law, and both DESE in their proposal to the State Board of Education and the proposal that's making it through the Senate keep the transfer law in place.
Even for a lapsed district.
Right. And so what will happen as a matter of course, whether this law passes or not, in my estimation, based on everything that Chris Nicastro, the Commissioner of Education, has said, and all the proposals that are making it through, either the legislation will fix it and will grandfather those kids from Normandy so that if they want to stay in Clayton, Kirkwood, Francis Howell, whatever, that they can stay there. Let those kids stay where they decided to switch to. I believe as a matter of good public policy, that's going to happen.
I hope so.
And if the legislature doesn't get it done, I believe DESE will do exactly what it did last year and what it's already signaled. It will step in. It will protect those kids.
Good.
And it will do what the legislature is perhaps unwilling to do politically.
I just don't want to forget about.
I think right now the legislature, at least in the Senate, is going in the right direction. I don't like the fact that the Senate bill has a a voucher portion to it. I think that's bad public policy. It may be unconstitutional. It could possibly kill the entire bill. I wish they'd get that out of there in the House. But short of that, I haven't read everything in the bill. Most of what they're trying to do in that bill is along the right line. Keep the transfer law in place so those kids have a choice. Make sure Normandy is able to finish the school year. Make sure kids, if they do transfer, don't bankrupt the existing district, and yet there's an opportunity. What they did that's really smart in the bill that is going through the Senate right now is they basically said to the Kirkwoods and the Claytons and the Rockwoods and all of the other districts, if you take these transfer kids, you've got a couple of choices. They basically said, don't charge the full tuition because we know you're not spending all of that money on new teachers. So don't do that. Give them a discount. And depending on how much they discount, they have some options. If they discount a whole bunch, which then protects the home district, then they don't have to take the kids that are transferring into their district won't count on their test scores for a while, which is what superintendents want, because superintendents don't want the transfer kids to bring down their own scores.
Right.
Or if you charge a little bit more but still less than what you could theoretically by law charge, then the state will kick in a little bit to make up the difference. So they're trying to find some reasonable compromise so that the school districts can both remain whole and still do the right thing, which is allow these kids to transfer if that's what they want to do.
This just makes me crazy.
It makes your head hurt.
It makes my head hurt because you know what? We're playing a lot of games to satisfy a small group of people. I understand. You know what? Every kid should have a good education, and every kid should have an education in their neighborhood. But the idea that we're going to do tap dances and spend legislative time and state board time figuring out some morass of transfer mess rather than spending the time getting these districts in order and giving kids an education in their neighborhood makes my head spin. So we're going to spend years and years talking about this process, and yet our kids are not getting an education in their neighborhood. If we would just devote the time to getting these districts, getting them up to speed, getting them training, getting whatever they need to get them going. I understand there may be too many districts and maybe we need to do some consolidating, but this is district consolidating without any thought. It's just mind-numbing to me.
So you're saying instead of sending all this money out of the district, why not pour more money into the district?
I'm not even talking about money. I'm not even, because that's the big debate. Oh, well, you're just going to throw more money at it. And I've never believed that throwing money alone takes care of this problem.
But we do underfund our schools.
But we do underfund them. But money isn't always the answer. And so the idea that whether there's tuition or not, that these kids are jumping all over, and it breaks down communities. And that's what we're seeing in Normandy. And even though they say, okay, we're going to let these kids stay transferred, that district is going to be gone, and it's the second one in the area. That's not happening in South County. That's not happening in rural Missouri. It's happening in urban, poor districts, in St. Louis, and Kansas City will be next.
Which is why.
And that is unacceptable. So now Normandy's not going to get fixed, and that bothers me. They didn't get a chance. You can't say, oh, school choice, but no choice for you in Normandy. You don't get to choose a home district now. And they may fix it in the future, but this community is entitled to keep their school if they want their school. So everybody talks about local control, but now we're just going to have kids running all over the state and running all over, St. Louis and in the county and the city. And, we're breaking down communities. And guess what? That's not a silver bullet. If it had been that easy, we'd have done it. The bottom line is we got to learn how to teach these kids.
I will say this. I find it interesting. You watch the news and listen to the news long enough. You have a community that has a rash of violence, gun violence, drug violence. What do the authorities do? We're going to send more police officers to that area. We're going to flood the zone. We're going to throw resources, and we're going to solve this crime problem.
But we won't do that for schools.
But we don't do that for our kids.
You have a school that is unaccredited, that the kids are failing.
Part of the reason because they took on other kids.
Right. But they don't blame the police for a crime-ridden neighborhood. Yet they blame the teachers for a failing school.
Correct.
Well, and here's why we don't do that. We don't do that because we have 24 school districts in St. Louis County and St. Louis City. The solution is the one proposed by the Post-Dispatch editorial board a week ago. We unify into one regional school district, the city and the county, get rid of all those barriers. Everybody's all of a sudden invested in every kid in this city and every kid in the county. and we're no longer protecting our little fiefdoms. We're no longer protecting our new football stadium. We're now invested in every kid, and then we will flood the zone because those kids' scores affect my scores out in Wildwood because all of a sudden we're all part of the same team. And so we will flood the heck out of that zone to improve those areas that aren't performing well because it affects all of us. That's the solution. And the irony of that solution is it was first proposed in 1968 by this big, huge commission that the governor put forward. And as soon as they put forward, everybody went crazy because, oh, my gosh, we can't have those kids in our schools. We have to protect our own fiefdoms. We got to break down all these fiefdoms in St. Louis. It's holding us back.
That's Tony Messenger, Jane Duker. We'll come back, wrap things up, the board meeting on the Big 550 KTRS.
I mean,
You're